Ride the signal through the unknown. This is the cryptic current.
You may have heard about the disappearance of people like the boy behind the painting or the man beyond Neptune. These individuals all vanished suddenly after displaying supernatural abilities. One conclusion drawn from these incidents is that they were likely controlled by someone or something. But this is also understandable. After all, if I were a person born with innate knowledge and extraordinary understanding without needing to study, even capable of predicting the future, surely everyone would want such a person by their side. In the last century, there was a man, similar to the boy behind the painting, who possessed many extraordinary abilities. He could control others' consciousness, making bank staff voluntarily hand over large sums of money to him. He didn't even need permission. Relying solely on consciousness control to freely enter and exit the residence of the Soviet leader, a world power at the time. He could also, without your consent, glance at you and know your deepest secrets. Most importantly, he had the ability to predict the future. His appearance at that time shocked the entire world. Stalin considered him a prodigy, Stalin regarded him as a benefactor, while Hitler saw him as an enemy. So, how did this special man astonish the famous figures of that era? Let's talk about a figure known as the World. Hello everyone, I'm Miss Rudy. In 1943, during World War II, when the war between Germany and the Soviet Union was intensifying, after many battles, the Soviet Union finally gained the upper hand. Then, just before the famous Tehran conference took place, at the place where Stalin led the Soviet Union, the lights suddenly blazed all night. After some chaos, Soviet government office intelligence agents reported to Stalin that his briefcase had disappeared. Upon hearing this, Stalin nearly fainted. In an instant, his eyes darkened. In that briefcase were many secret documents, such as military deployment plans and spy lists. And the disappearance of such a briefcase meant that his residence either had a spy or an intruder. Stalin said no more and immediately ordered the agents to find a very important magician. At that moment, the agents wondered if they had misheard. In such an urgent situation, why would the General Secretary think of finding a magician? Could it be that he wanted him to magically bring the briefcase back? But a second later, Stalin promised with an extremely fierce glare, signaling to the agents that if they didn't hurry to find the person, they wouldn't see the sun tomorrow. Immediately, all the agents departed. They had to go find the magician. Elsewhere, a magic show was taking place at the magnificent concert hall. The audience below were all local dignitaries. Since last year, after the war between the Soviet Union and Germany, they rarely went out to relax. But now, the war situation seemed to be slowing down. Finally, they could feel more at ease and enjoy their peaceful lives. Just as the performance was reaching its climax, a group of agents sent by Stalin suddenly burst in, taking away the magician performing on stage, leaving the assistant and the entire audience below stunned and surprised. Not long after, the magician was brought to Stalin's residence. He asked those around him where that briefcase was usually kept. The agents replied that it was usually in the General Secretary's office. Then, escorted by a group of people, the magician entered Stalin's office, sat down on the comfortable sofa, and 5 minutes later, he disappeared. He saw a river with a bridge over it. Next to it was a church. Just go there and you will find the document case. Sure enough, half an hour later, all in the address the magician had given, the secret agent found the secret document case. And actually, that was Korfmetzing. In 1899, Korfmetzing was born into a Jewish family in Poland. Since childhood, his parents had noticed Metzing had an extraordinary memory. Therefore, they hoped that when he grew up, Metzing could contribute something to Judaism. To achieve this goal, Metzing's father even invited a friend to pretend to be God, making young Metzing believe he was the chosen one. But later, Metzing discovered the truth, unable to accept being deceived like that. Metzing boarded a train and ran away from home. But as soon as he got on the train, Metzing encountered his first difficulty. Having no money, Metzing couldn't buy a train ticket. Before him, the ticket inspector was approaching. Metzing quickly curled up and hid under the seat. But even doing that, how could he fool the ticket inspector? When the inspector asked the boy for his ticket, Metzing was very nervous, so he picked up a piece of paper from the floor and handed it to the inspector. The inspector took the paper, glanced at it, then punched a hole. Young man, Don. It turned out, in that instant, Metzing had used his ability to control the ticket inspector, making him think that paper was a train ticket. This was the first time Metzing discovered that he had the ability to control others' consciousness. But Metzing truly awakened to his ability after one event. After running away from home, Metzing went to Berlin and found a job at a construction site. Due to the heavy workload and very low pay, Metzing always lived in hunger and poverty. As time passed, Metzing's health deteriorated. Then one day, Metzing suddenly fainted. A group of people saw this and quickly took Metzing to the hospital. As emergency treatment, Metzing. Therefore, the medical staff took him to the morgue. Unexpectedly, the next day an intern at the morgue discovered Metzing lying in the morgue but had come back to life. That intern immediately reported to the doctor. When the doctor heard this news, he was extremely astonished, because not only had he confirmed that Metzing had stopped breathing and his heartbeat had ceased, but everyone in the emergency room at that time was certain Metzing had died. But now, Metzing's heartbeat had recovered. Thanks to the doctor's treatment, Metzing gradually recovered his health. And then, this matter came to the attention of a doctor named Abel. This doctor was very curious about Metzing. Therefore, he proactively sought him out and was willing to help Metzing solve his living problems in Brooklyn. In return, Metzing had to let Dr. Abel study the phenomenon of how Metzing had died but was able to come back to life. However, after more than a year had passed, he found the cause of Metzing. But he noticed something incredibly unbelievable. During one experiment, the doctor unexpectedly discovered that Metzing could use the power of his will to freely control his own heartbeat. And when Metzing's heartbeat weakened to the point of being unmeasurable, then Metzing could hear the thoughts in others' hearts. And since no research materials related to death and resurrection were found, Dr. Abel sold Metzing to a circus. At that time, the doctor certainly couldn't have imagined that telepathy was just one of Metzing's many other abilities. If Abel had known about Metzing's other abilities, he definitely wouldn't have sold Metzing to the circus. In 1914, the streets of Vienna, Austria were flooded with flyers about a magic performance. This was a very hot magic act at the time, a psychological experiment. And by this time, Metzing was no longer a commodity that could be bought and sold at will like in the past, but had become a magician that everyone knew. Metzing's most famous performance was that he could easily read the past of the audience that are sitting below. For example, how many times they had been in love with their even their current thoughts, Metzing could see through. Because this performance truly amazed people. Whenever it was Metzing's show, the hall was definitely packed. And of course, that included today. That day, just like every other time, when the assistant had just blindfolded Metzing's eyes. But for some reason, he kept silent and didn't speak. As people gradually began to feel that Metzing was acting unusually today, he suddenly uttered in a trembling voice that in a few months, a terribly devastating war would break out in Europe, and this war would even spread worldwide. Because Metzing's emotions were extremely agitated and the performance ultimately couldn't continue. Although this performance left people somewhat stunned, The audience below thought it was just part of the show, so they didn't pay too much attention to it. Until several months later, on July 28, 1914. The Austro-Hungarian Empire declared war on Serbia, and afterward, World War I broke out. After this war occurred, people then realized that perhaps Metzing wasn't just a magician. In fact, it's very possible he had never performed any magic. And behind those amazing performances, there might be hidden an identity that would astonish everyone. And because of this event, Metzing himself was dubbed by everyone as the most miraculous character. Just when Metzing's reputation was spreading widely, the extremely famous scholar at that time, Mr. Stang, also became curious about this person. Therefore, Mr. Stang decided to meet this miraculous character that everyone was talking about. When Metzing received Mr. Stang's invitation, he was very happy. In fact, for a long time, he had always wanted professionals to come study him, because Metzing also really wanted to know why he possessed abilities that others didn't have. On the other hand, after Metzing accepted the invitation, Mr. Stang immediately invited a psychologist also from North Union, Sigmund Freud. The two of them decided to design an experiment together to see whether Metzing had miraculous abilities as rumored. That day, Sigmund Freud arrived very early and even brought a pair of tweezers from home. Then hid these tweezers in Mr. Stang's house. After Metzing arrived as scheduled, Sigmund Freud simply explained that he hoped Metzing could read what he was thinking in his mind, and then perform that action. After hearing this, Metzing smiled and closed his eyes. Soon after, Metzing seemed to have figured something out, then left the living room and went to a small room, opened a drawer, took out the tweezers, walked up to Mr. Stang, and then, he pulled out one of Mr. Stang's beard hairs. At that moment, Mr. Stang was completely stunned. He truly couldn't believe he had just had a beard hair plucked. He looked at Freud in astonishment. Was this really his thought? Unexpectedly, Freud also responded to Mr. Stang with an unbelievable expression. This was indeed my thought. On September 1, 1939, World War II began. Since Metzing had predicted the timing of World War I, therefore when World War II started, a series of media outlets asked Metzing if he could prophesy when the war would end. Unexpectedly, Metzing actually answered this question. Metzing said, "Although I cannot give the exact year, I can confirm that World War II will end on May 8th. What's noteworthy is that the actual end date of World War II wasn't the day Metzing mentioned, but it couldn't be said that Metzing was wrong. We'll talk more about this later. But now let's return to the earlier interview. In this interview, Metzing additionally said that if Germany actively launched an attack on Lenzo, then Hitler's death would come earlier, and Lenzo would ultimately win. When the media published these statements from Metzing, many people were extremely shocked, especially Hitler himself. Without saying a word, he immediately ordered a reward of 200,000 marks for whoever takes Metzing's head. And from then on, Metzing began a life of wandering escape. During this process, Metzing was once captured, but later, he used his ability to control consciousness, making all the guards voluntarily enter the prison cell. After that, he escaped onto a train to Lenzo, because he wrote that Lenzo would ultimately win in the trial battle too. After experiencing a dangerous escape, Metzing finally arrived in Lenzo. First, he rented a small room, then started performing on the streets. But not long after, a group of agents found him. It turned out that as soon as Stalin heard the news of Metzing's arrival in Lent, he was very eager to meet this strange man in person. Upon meeting Metzing, Stalin said, "Now I will give you an opportunity to get rich. If you can complete 2 tests, I will let you be my personal advisor. You will live in a luxurious villa, and no longer have to endure hardship. But if you cannot complete them, it proves you are a fraud, and the consequence of deceiving me will be disastrous." After speaking, Stalin gave Metzing the first challenge task: rob a bank. After receiving the task, Metzing was invited by the escort staff to board an official. In less than 20 minutes, they arrived at the Lenzo National Bank. This was the bank with the highest security in Lenzo at that time. Since the bank was established, no incidents had ever occurred. The escort staff eagerly awaited to watch the drama unfold. They dropped Metzing off in front of the bank and left. But actually, another undercover agent was already waiting inside the bank. Stalin required the entire process of Metzing's bank robbery to be monitored. As for Metzing, after getting out of the car, he calmly walked to a bank counter. Then, he picked up a piece of paper from the table and handed it to the teller. Next, a miraculous thing happened. The bank teller immediately went into the vault, took out 100,000 rubles, and gave it to Metzing. The agent who was always watching Metzing couldn't contain his astonishment, because he was certain that the paper Metzing gave to the teller was just an ordinary blank sheet. And with that blank paper, he had a penny to his name, couldn't. This was truly too astonishing. However, Stalin was not someone easy to compromise with. He immediately ordered Metzing to proceed with the final challenge. Stalin believed that the reason Metzing could withdraw 100,000 rubles, it's very likely based on a little trick. Those without professional training are naturally easily deceived. But his residence was different. Stalin's residence was one of the most strictly guarded areas in the Soviet Union. Here were first-class guards on duty. If Metzing could enter without permission, directly from outside into this residence, then you would truly believe that Metzing had supernatural abilities. At that time, during the war with Germany, Hitler had sent a 3 million strong army across the border. Therefore, after completing his task, Stalin immediately went to the meeting room to continue discussing with senior leaders how to respond to the war and other related issues. 3 hours later, the meeting ended, and Stalin returned to his office. At that moment, he thought, this Metzing fellow was quite commendable. Turned out to be a real trickster. But just then, he suddenly saw in the corner of his office a man sitting there. No mistake, it was indeed Metzing. From this time onward, Metzing gained Stalin's trust. Almost every week, Stalin would meet with him. To the outside, it was always said that the leader was watching a performance. But in reality, Stalin was relying on Metzing's supernatural abilities to deploy military arrangements. It turned out that Metzing also had remote viewing ability, able to see distant places. Hitler was preparing to attack the Soviet Union from the beginning. As for remote viewing, this is one of the 6 recognized human paranormal abilities. If you want to learn more, you can refer to videos of psychics using remote viewing to observe the moon. Then you will understand better. Returning to the earlier story, with Metzing's assistance, a weakened Soviet Union launched the Moscow campaign, successfully repelling Hitler's blitzkrieg tactics. From then on, the Soviet Union seemed blessed, continuously winning numerous major and minor campaigns. And then later, on April 30th, 1945, news of Hitler's suicide began to spread in Germany. When Stalin received this information, it was already May 8, 1945. And this 8 was exactly the time that from the very beginning, Metzing had said World War II would end. And in history, there really were historians who considered Hitler's death and the atomic bombing of Japan as the end of World War II. So it can be said that Metzing's prophecy had relatively high accuracy. Then, let's continue to see what else this prophet predicted. The first prophecy that Metzing actually made, as private advice to Stalin, was that he warned Stalin that his son's flight the next day would meet with disaster. After Stalin heard this, he immediately told his son not to take the plane tomorrow. Indeed, that plane really had an accident. Another source claims it was the day Stalin died. After Metzing predicted Hitler would die, Stalin asked Metzing if he knew the day of his own death. Metzing thought for a moment and replied that he did. And this event would occur on March 5, 1953. Stalin remained silent after hearing this, then asked Metzing, what about the day of his death? Metzing replied, after him. Besides some future predictions already mentioned, Metzing also said the following: Starting from the 21st century, the world will still experience many bloody conflicts. These conflicts are not for competing over resources, but to reduce the population. He also mentioned that a 9-to-3 world will truly happen, but he didn't specify the exact time, only saying that an important figure will appear. This person will lead humanity to end war, and simultaneously become the founder of a new world. And from then on, humans will no longer worship materialism. These changes will bring 1,000 years of peace to the world. Metzing also said that, in the future, the US will be replaced by some Eastern country. The US dollar will no longer be a strong currency either, and the eastern part of the Soviet Union will be occupied by China. Notably, he also mentioned that Taiwan and Japan might be threatened by nuclear weapons. Because most of Metzing's documents during his lifetime were classified as secret. The reason we know this information today all comes from his works during his lifetime. Therefore, evaluating Metzing online is quite hard to say. Some people believe that the stories about Metzing lack solid evidence. But there are also researchers in VOT locality. The miraculous events Metzing mentioned in his works had indeed occurred before. Otherwise, Metzing wouldn't have received such treatment from Stalin. And notably, after the Soviet Union dissolved, although a large number of documents were declassified, the only documents that were missed were Metzing's. So what do you all think? What reason do you think makes Russia even today still unwilling to disclose Metzing's documents? Do you believe Metzing truly had supernatural abilities? And most importantly, what do you think about the future predictions Metzing mentioned? Hope you share your thoughts so we can discuss together. That's all for today. Thank you for taking the time to watch. If you find this video interesting, please share it with a friend, so they too can know that many strange things are happening around us. Thank you for watching. Goodbye and see you again.
If the signal hooked you, subscribe and catch the next ripple.